putting together another plan to release $25.1 billion for new relief right now. And the person who's in the clip says that we're in the what is it? Hold on. The biggest, the war. I don't want to quote this incorrectly here. The most severe challenge our country has faced since the Second World War. That really hit me. I was going to talk about ego and isolation and all kinds of different stuff today, but after I read that, it just kind of hit me that this is a yes, I know this is a big deal. Like, there's no getting around that. But reading that we're $381 billion in debt as a country, and I haven't even read like who owns that debt. You know, did we print money? Did we borrow it from another country? Did we borrow it from China or the States, or, you know, I don't know. But you know, this year has obviously been challenging for all of us. And when I read that and I hear some of the quotes in this is saying that, you know, they're going to offer more support to businesses that were really affected by the pandemic. And, you know, as much as I appreciate that sentiment, what I'm really concerned about is what the people who are just starting in their business, not the people who are just, you know, established and having a hard time, who are big businesses. Like, what about the wave of people who are trying to get something going, or maybe just like squeaking by, which most people were, especially in the States. So I'm reading this Canadian government, $381 billion in debt. I don't even know how to wrap my head around that. And, you know, I think that it can be really easy to, now with the internet, because there's so much stimulation, there's so much new input, it can be really easy to kind of miss the big picture of what's going on. Good morning, Joe. But to have our country in that much debt, just makes me really sad, to be honest. You know, this is if this is the worst that it's been in our country since the Second World War, like, what does that really mean? What do we need to do? Someone's saying here, America's in the trillions of debt. What are we supposed to do? You know, and I think most of this year, I tried to keep things as normal as possible. You know, business as usual, so to speak. And that's been my way of coping. And when I'm looking forward to 2021, you know, I'm asking questions about how to really be respectful to the reality, and I don't really know how to answer that. Yo, Joe, do you want to hop on here and chat about this? I feel like you'd be a great person to talk about this with. Let's see if Joe answers. I know there's a delay in these IG lives. It's a weird situation. I want to talk with Joe about this.
What's good, brother? How are you? You all right?
Hey, buddy. How's it going?
Man, I'm cool as a fan. Cool as a fan. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm just like, I was gonna get on here and talk some existential, spiritual kind of shit, but then I read the news and I was like, what does this mean for our world? You know?
Look, yeah, because as you can tell, I'm driving right now. I'm driving back to my spot. I was in Winston-Salem getting some stuff out of my storage unit because there's some more stuff still in my storage unit. Unfortunately, it's not the rest of my collection of records and my giant map of the world. And I left my trombone in the storage unit too because I just don't really feel like playing that right now. But yeah, I was watching the news this morning. I'm like, damn, all right, aid package to Canada. That's nice. At least you guys actually have a leader that's actually going to offer an aid package to you. But then I thought about that. I'm like, okay, you brothers and sisters were already dealing with all this debt before when you had this whole CERB thing, and then CERB expired, and then everybody transitioned back over to EI. And then it's like, okay, what happens when EI is done?
Yeah.
So, it's the depression that you're, I think, beginning to express verbally and probably starting to feel right now is quite honestly, Cam, is the next pandemic. The next pandemic that's going to take place right now, in addition to COVID-19, is this pandemic of fear, this pandemic of despair. And quite honestly, if there's enough angry Canadians, and quite honestly, there's definitely enough angry Americans, is a phenomenon called anomie, ANOMIE. And a sociologist named Emil Durkheim created this concept of anomie, ANOMIE, which is essentially a state of lawlessness. And I can totally see that happening. Take a look at what's happening in France right now with the security law that was written last week, where citizens are not allowed to film police officers in any sort of police interventions.
Wow.
And people in France protested like hell over the past weekend, which is really not much of a departure from what they've been typically doing, given the yellow vest movement and the black vest movement. But now they're like, yo, no, we're not going for this. And we're going to protest until you change this shit.
Yeah.
And now the foreign minister and the president, Emmanuel Macron, are like, okay, yeah, we're going to rewrite Article 22 or 23 or something. So now France is like, yo, look, we're basically on the edge and on the brink. And so, quite honestly, we're what you're seeing in Canada right now was, yes, it was the remnants of the Harper decade, but realistically, it's really more a reflection of Trudeau's neoliberalist policies that have created a situation where, number one, you need to be in debt, but number two, where you have a whole generation of people that are now like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life?
Well, exactly. And I think, what I'm really curious about is, throughout the pandemic, through the internet, you can exist in a world through the internet that makes it seem like you can act as if everything's normal, right? Like you can buy the same shit, you can engage with the same media, you can connect to the same people. But that's not actually what you're not buying into the same world that actually exists when you participate in that. Does that make sense? So I find that what I'm experiencing now is this dissonance between like realizing so much of what I'm hoping to accomplish or create is in a world that doesn't really exist, and asking myself, what is the world that exists, and exactly what you said, how do I fit into it? What do I do for the rest of my life? Especially as someone who is primarily person oriented. I don't want to deal with products. I don't want to go work in a shitty factory or an office job and push paper. And I don't think the world needs more of those people. So I'm really, really concerned about that.
No, the world doesn't need more paper pushers. The world needs more people persons.
Yeah.
And I hope that makes sense the way I said it, because the world needs, it's what we see more of right now over the past 10 or 15 years. And God knows I know about education because I had to go through two master's degrees in 4 years. So I understand the school system. And my ex-wife is a middle school teacher and I'm a middle school principal. So I understand what schools are trying to do. What schools are trying to do, or what they've done successfully, quite honestly, is go away from humanities, where you actually learn about dealing with people and history and situations. And we've gone more towards a towards STEM, science, technology, and math, engineering and math. And when you go through science, technology, engineering, and math, by default, you're getting away from the humanities. You're getting away from people because you're dealing with an absolute science. There's, 1+1 is 2. There's no real subjectivity about that. 32 degrees Fahrenheit is equivalent to 0 degrees Celsius. There's no subjectivity about that. 43,560 square feet is equivalent to an acre of land. There's really no subjectivity towards that. But how do you deal with somebody that is overweight and trying to get themselves fit? Everybody's human body is different, and it takes a certain amount of emotional labor and emotional intelligence to deal with that, and to deal with people on a human level, on a personal level, that no amount of algorithms or computer engineering or electrical engineering or science is going to be able to remedy in any sort of reasonable or suitable fashion.
Totally. And it's so interesting that like the process of us systemizing our life and systemizing everything has ultimately dug us a hole in which we are losing sight of the ultimate system, which is this thing, that we've tried to outsource so much of our purpose and so much of our activity to things that can be done automated, that we no longer have any idea of what we're even capable of doing as a human being. And I think that there's going to be an increase of existential crisis. I think it's already present, obviously, but there's a curiosity of like, and I encounter this throughout the pandemic. I was constantly asking, as a business, you need to systemize. You can't be the sole person responsible for every activity. And at the same time, the whole reason I think life is nourishing and the whole reason life is valuable is because you get to engage with other people and really nourish those relationships. So I encountered this, I mentioned this in one of my videos, like I made a joke a year ago being like, I'm never going to be a fucking online trainer. And then the pandemic happened and I had to kind of go down that route. And every step of the way, there's this resistance of like, this is not how I want it. This is not how it's supposed to happen. This is not what's supposed to go down.
Yeah, it's not. And I think part of the reason why there's this dissonance, and that's such an accurate word, Cam, and I thank you for mentioning that, because the dissonance is, and the terminology that we've been hearing for the better part of almost 9 months now, is social distancing. I'm going to make sure everybody understands this whenever we watch this, or everybody who's watching right now. We've been told to be socially distant. And that terminology, in my opinion, is a misnomer, because what we're supposed to be doing in order to slow the spread of COVID-19 is supposed to be physically distant. But nowhere in the concept of being physically distant were we supposed to be socially distant. Physically distant doesn't necessarily mean that you isolate yourselves from other people. Being physically distant means, stay 6 feet away as much as possible. But what we've now done is equated being physically distant, which I think is what the intent of what the health protocol was supposed to be, to being socially distant. So now what we've gone ahead and done is use technology as a way to not only isolate ourselves, so we are now physically distant, but we've isolated ourselves socially. So human interaction has become devalued to the point of, hey, I can just online date, or hey, the classroom is now Zoom.
Yeah.
Or you know what? Yeah, I can teach you how to do a downward facing dog without actually having to touch your legs and your arms and your scapulas to make sure that your arms are in the right position, or your hamstrings are properly engaged, or your hips are moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
I don't have to actually physically touch you because I've been told to be physically distant, and I've been told to be socially distant.
Yeah.
And I've somehow conflated and confused both terminologies to now where we're just like, you know what? Yeah, I don't actually want to see anybody. I don't want to be around anybody. And this kind of whole phenomenon was happening, kind of quite honestly, even before the pandemic, because there have been plenty of times where you're like, yeah, you know what? I want to go out tonight, but nah, I don't feel like being around with these people. I'll just stay home.
Yeah.
Or, you know what? Yeah, shit. You know what? Yeah, they called, but I don't want to go out to dinner. I'll just stay home and be by myself. And now we're just like, you know what? Shit, it would be really nice to go out to a restaurant and have a couple of drinks and, you know, share some appetizers with some friends. But now because we're told to be socially distant, we're not allowed to go out to bars or restaurants or clubs anymore. But now the whole idea of even interacting with people has become just this foreign entity.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, what you're hitting on too is a really weird, and this is what I was going to talk about today before I read the news, which was the difference between isolation and solitude, and how, you know, when, when you're really, when you're in isolation, it's kind of, there's a negative kind of connotation to that, or intonation to that. Whereas solitude is a place of self-reflection. And I think we've lost touch with the value of being alone. And so I think that there's this weird thing happening where, like, this could possibly be a deep introspective time for everybody, which for some people it is, but we've been kind of, we don't really have the education around the value of being in solitude. And so we're losing the value of what could be possible right now. And I don't know if that's because of the internet or because of modern day society or whatever, but you know, this could have looked different if we knew the difference between isolating and having solitude, and having a practice around that. But yeah, I mean, I'm really, I've felt continuously more stumped as the days go by, of like, I actually was going to make a joke about this. How how everyone writes down their New Year's resolutions. I was kind of just going to make a video of like writing down, like, a title of New Year's resolutions, and then just burst into laughter, because it's like, how do you even look at that rationally? Like, what's the process there? Who do you, what basis are you making decisions on?
Exactly. And it's interesting that you mentioned the whole idea of isolation versus loneliness. I think it's what you said.
Solitude.
Solitude. Thank you. There's a line in a Bill Withers song, and I think the name of the song is called "I Want to Spend the Night with You," where there's a line in the song where he says, "Loneliness isn't freedom."
Loneliness isn't freedom. No. Yeah, I agree with that.
And that goes right along with what you're talking about. Loneliness isn't freedom. There are a lot of people right here that are lonely, but they're trapped inside their own mental or physical or psychological or physiological prisons. They're locked away. There's a difference, and I mentioned this in one of my live and direct chats from months ago. There's a difference between being and incarcerated. There is a difference. Being incarcerated is being just in the same place all the time. Being incarcerated is being imprisoned, locked away, put in jail because you did something wrong. So right now, many of us who are in quote isolation or solitude, or we're home by ourselves, that is carceration. But incarceration is, you're in a prison, you're in jail. And now more than ever, I think the lines are becoming increasingly blurred between incarceration and carceration. Because just because we're not under state supervision doesn't mean that we are not being imprisoned.
Yeah, you're touching on such an interesting part of what what's going on here. And I was thinking about this too, that like a lot of the people who are very pro heavy regulation are mostly from a generation who maybe either their parents experienced the Depression or the war, or they experienced some sort of like coming out of the Depression, and they understand the value of like putting in the work of protecting our country. But it's kind of a totally different world. And I find what I'm noticing is like the people who are making the decisions are all from a different generation. They don't understand what's actually going on. You know what I mean?
Sure. Of course.
And they're applying their past to the present, and we need new rules. We need new input. We need people who are very au courant to like what the fuck is actually going on in the social atmosphere, and what the new information is around mental health and how to take care of people. Like, back in the day, it was all about psychotherapy, and now it's like progressively moving towards body-based therapy. It's
Yes.
progressively moving into the nuance of empowerment and understanding emotions and feelings and the brain, and like there's so much newness there that, like, how could you possibly dismiss that or create just the same rules that you would 50 years ago or 40 years ago. And I just feel like I don't know, I don't even know, I don't know how to approach that, other than to try to make myself safe. That's kind of like, and that's what's really scary. I don't know if you saw that video. I'll say this last thing here, but uh there's a video of a guy, a gym owner in Vancouver, who got recently, again, they went into some sort of new regulation lockdown. And he's like, listen, guys, I'm a rational person. I'm on your team. I'm willing to play the part. I'm willing to look out for people. But when you start playing with our emotions this way and you're taking away something that took me 11 years to build, I'm going to become an emotional person, and I'm going to be inaccessible to your new help, even if you try to give it, because it's getting to the point where it's too late. I'm on my edge. I don't want to listen to you. And I think we're going to start experiencing that, especially, I mean, I feel it now. I feel that's what's going on, is people are just that, like, they're like, listen, you fucked the dog a little bit, and we're not even accessible.
Yep. Yeah. It's just like I said about 10 or 15, about 7 or 8 miles back, when I said right now that despair is going to lead to anomie, and anomie is that state of lawlessness.
Yeah.
And Grandmaster Flash in the tune called "The Message" said it best in the hook. He said, "Don't don't push me because I'm close to the edge. I'm trying not to lose my head."
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
And that's where we are right now. There's a whole lot of people out here that are trying to not lose their heads, even though they've been pushed to the edge. And they've been pushed to the edge through no fault of their own. Through no fault of their own. And Cam, the best advice, or maybe not even advice, but the best thought that I had to maybe something you said, you're like, hey, you know what? I don't even know how to deal with what I'm supposed to be dealing with right now. I don't know, what am I supposed to do? How do I approach all of this? And you said the best thing to do is to keep yourself safe. That's a good start. I think the other thing that these conversations that I have on a daily basis, and with my friend Kat on a weekly basis, and we're doing the next one today, is to slowly create new communities, new environments, new ecosystems where you have people who want what you want and are of like mind, body, and spirit, who are willing to go ahead and sacrifice for the betterment of society, who are willing to give of themselves for the betterment of the group. There needs to be a new level of altruism and conviviality that must take place, because right now what we're seeing more than ever, because of social distancing, is an increasing amount of selfishness. And this sort of selfishness has permeated into not only the highest level of some government, but in the highest reaches of the economic stratas that exist in both of our countries. You take a look at the oligarchs that truly call the shots in the United States and in Canada, their fortunes have increased by thousands of percent into the billions and billions of dollars. And for I guess the quote unquote working class folks like me and you, it's just been, okay, here's some unemployment, here's a $1,200 check, go about your business, go ahead and live your life. And there has to be more to what we're doing right now than just us as individuals. There has to be a collective effort and energy towards improving our societies. There has to be a collective effort and energy to having new people in government, new leadership in government. And I just said this the other day with regards to the United States. The United States had 3 presidential candidates for all intents and purposes. You had Bernie Sanders, you had Donald Trump, you had Joe Biden. These are 3 70-year-old white guys.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't do better than 3 70-year-old white guys for the president of the United States.
Oh my God.
If you look at the House leadership has, I think, as the Speaker of the House is Nancy Pelosi. She's 81. Steny Hoyer is the House Majority Leader. He's 73, 74, and Jim Clyburn, he's got to be pushing 80.
Yeah.
You mean to tell me we have these three old fossils in the House of Representatives, and this is part of the leadership of the United States government?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
This is what we've got?
Yeah.
And then when you talk about how, and I talked about this with the Wall Street part, and I talked about the American dream about a month ago, how the boomer generation sold generation X, Y, and Z empty bag of groceries.
Right.
It was, hey, look, you live the American dream will work for you. But what are we dreaming about? What are we supposed to be dreaming? And the people who told us that, they had a sense of solidarity. They had a sense of community. They actually had something obvious and apparent and visible and tangible that they had to fight against. But now that the stuff that we're fighting for, sure, there seems to be a bit more of an obviousness to it, but yet there's still so much intangibility towards it because of the way that our society has been built around technology and the virtual reality, and what Jamiroquai talked about as a virtual insanity. He said that years ago in the song. The future is made of virtual insanity, and right now, that virtual insanity has become a literal insanity. Because again, you have people right now who are being pushed to the edge and try not to lose their heads.
Yeah. Well, what's even more kind of I don't know if the word concerning is even, I hate kind of using that word, but it's like, the small businesses and the small people who are trying to organize themselves, unfortunately, use the systems, the Facebook. I mean, I think is one of the biggest conversations of our era. Like the people who are creating income for themselves, whatever small amount there is, they're using Facebook. And that behemoth doesn't even have, I mean, I don't know if you watch The Social Dilemma, but the people who even, are in charge don't really even understand how the algorithms work. And so we've we know that the system is operating at a speed and a frequency and a level that we're not benefiting from, and that this is all kind of creating chaos. But people don't know how it works anymore, even the company that owns it. And the people who are suffering because of it are also benefiting from it. So it's kind of like a heroin addiction. It's like, how do you kick the addiction? You can't necessarily just go cold turkey, because you're not going to meet the needs that are necessary for you to have a sustainable life. But at the same time, you got to get off it. It's fucking up your life. So it's this weird, I think, and I've heard this several times where people are like, oh, well, we've never experienced this level of conversation around, these topics ever in history. And it's like, well, this is kind of a new renaissance. It's a digital renaissance. It's like we've discovered for the first time, the first time someone had a mirror in the fucking, I don't know what century, but that was a big deal. When someone could look at themselves in the face without having a painting done of them, that was a renaissance. That was a big fucking deal. And now we're having this new level of reflection through a new type of mirror that's, showing us all kinds of dimensions to us that we never even knew before. And, I just wonder, I love your suggestion. And that's where I'm definitely leaning towards, is like cultivating community. And I have a group that we meet up every week, and we discuss things that we want to be accountable for. It's kind of like a AA group for accountability. So that's been really positive out of all this. But it's just curious to see how this month is like, I think, the most emotional month for the world. Everyone wants to be with their family. Everyone wants to eat turkey and get drunk. Or I don't know if it's turkey or whatever for Christmas. I don't really celebrate Christmas, but
neither do I.
But it's like this time of year is usually so sacred and so desired to just let go in a whole other way. And then there's no, like, New Year's Eve. Like, what the fuck is going to happen New Year's Eve? There's going to be a lot of people who are just had their wits end and they're going to just hit the streets or something and have a party, you know, and this is going to cause a whole other ruckus.
Or it could go the other way. Or it could be in a situation where governments that have mandated that everybody stay indoors institute some type of extreme measures to make sure everybody stays indoors. It could go the other way.
Right. Yeah, it could go the other way. You're right.
You know, it could entirely go the other way. And the whole idea about creating that community and having accountability partners and making sure that we have people who, well, you said it was like an AA meeting, or, you know, and that makes total sense, because clearly we have to, as collectively, we all have to acknowledge that there is a problem. So collectively we can solve the problem.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to go ahead and have a, you know, I understand the need to have an individual outlook for an individual societal problem. And we're not going to fix a societal problem with an individual solution.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
What we need is groups, communities to solve these community problems or societal problems. We can't go ahead and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to solve everything for everybody.
Yeah.
I don't think you can necessarily do that. But what you can do is solve something for yourself, and then have a group of people around you that are willing to help you and support you in your journey.
Yeah.
And obviously you would reciprocate. So you would have people that are willing to support you in their journey, and vice versa. But when we talk about these societal issues, these can't be solved with just one person.
Mm.
It has to be a group and collective effort, which is why for the better part of a few months, I've been like, look, we need a workers' strike. Shut this country down. Shut Canada down. Okay? Because, again, there's a bunch of individuals that want stuff to happen. But, you know, look, I'm driving right now, but I'm showing you my hand. Okay? When you run ahead and when you want to make impact, it's a lot easier when you have 5 fingers together moving collectively as a fist, as opposed to a finger here, a finger here, a finger here, a finger here, and a thumb just kind of hanging out.
Mm.
All right? If you poke somebody in the eyes, all right, yeah, that's going to hurt. But eventually you'll get over it. All right? But a thumb to the ribs is not going to do nearly as much damage and make as much of an impact as a solid fist to the ribs or a solid fist to the liver. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So my point is, we can't move together as fingers. We have to move together as a fist.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I appreciate that metaphor, and I think there's a lot of resonance in there for me. And I think there's a part of me, like, in this conversation and in this time that you and I have kind of like been back and forth a little bit, and I've started talking more and I've been online more. That's like, I feel like there's a tone that's being set now that when I look 5 years in the future, that this is like a breeding ground. This is like the compost turning over, you know, like we're putting the rotting vegetables down and we're like, listen, there's no fruit yet. There's no vegetables to eat. But these ideas, these like little nuggets that you're talking about of coming together and coming up with new ideas. I feel like this is the compost, and we're utilizing this platform. Unfortunately, you've been censored, which is such a insane thing. I can't believe that's going down. But we're utilizing these platforms to create our own composts to reap the benefits of our community in the long term. And who knows where these conversations are going to go, man? Like, who knows where you're going to be in 5 years or 3 years or even 2 years? And this is going to be the first moment where you have the Joe Nice podcast, and it's got 300 million people listening to you or something, you know, like,
hey, anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. Anything can happen. And it's interesting how you mentioned the whole compost and planting seeds and turning the soil over. And, you know, when you compost, you got to have a little limestone in it, so like everything decomposes a little bit quicker. You know, we talk about policing, and we talk about the common phrases. Oh, well, there's just a couple of bad apples in the bunch. Well, if you have an orchard that consistently produces bad fruit, you have to take out the orchard.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing right now with our governments is we have governments and societies and governmental systems and social systems that consistently put out bad fruit. So what we need to do is to uproot all of the trees in the orchard so we can replant new trees so we get new fruit, better fruit, better quality fruit. Because you can't just go ahead and say, oh, well, you know what? There's just a couple of bad apples in the bunch, when every time we talk about government or we talk about police or we talk about corporate leaders, that they're consistently doing people wrong. And you can't just say that it's just a one-off situation or an aberration or just an unlucky coincidence. An unlucky coincidence over a period of time no longer becomes a coincidence. That becomes a habit. It becomes consistent, and it becomes systematic. And when it becomes systematic, it no longer is a random occurrence. It's not random. And at that point, like to use your analogy about planting fruits and seeds and all of that, again, if you have an orchard that consistently puts out bad fruit, time for a new orchard. Cut down all the trees, uproot all the trees, get new roots. And when we talk about new roots, if you've ever watched anything about mushrooms and mycelium grows under the ground, but there's constantly a connection underneath the ground of mycelium. There's a wonderful book, I think it's by Terence McKenna, it's called Mycelium Running. Yeah. And he talks about how mycelium is the largest organism in the world, and it just constantly connects and communicates with each other. And that's what we need now more than ever, we need these networks of communication. And right now they are underground, similar to how the mycelium are underneath the ground. But eventually the efforts of all of the nutrients from the mycelium eventually become mushrooms that sprout up from the ground and make themselves visible and known. And eventually you're going to have somebody from the mycelium, new mushrooms or new leaders or new representatives of that ecosystem that come up from the underground and make themselves known and make themselves present.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think when you're talking about that, and as the last, I got to run off here in a minute here, but the really crazy thing about mycelium is that it finds opportunities within the decay of the forest to create life, just like
compost,
right?
Just like compost,
totally. And it's the weird part is that the automated system that we currently are experiencing in the form of the internet and governmental systems is that it does the complete opposite. It creates more disorder out of opportunities of disorder. It creates more challenges. It's like, oh, here's a little place to grow. Okay, I'm gonna make more bullshit for it to happen. And it's purposely designed to profit off of the bad situation rather than to disseminate new information, which is the mycelium. It's all there to benefit the forest. Right? It's never there to hurt the forest. Whereas the systems now, it's like it's benefiting that one tree, that one standing rotting tree. So it's really it's a freaky world, but I think we're gonna pull through, man. I think that we're gonna find ways of composting all this and figuring out. I mean, I'm devoted to the creative process, and I know you are as an artist. I'm sure. How many times does it take you to mix those two songs together in a way that just fucking claps and makes it so tight? It takes time. It takes a lot of effort and experimentation. I think we're gonna get there.
I think we're gonna get there too, Kev. And I think the other thing, and I know you got to get going soon, is we don't have a choice in this. We have to get through this.
Yeah.
We have to get through this.
Yeah.
These are our lives we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And I forget who said, I think my uncle said this to me years ago. He said, look, if you live your life right, once is enough. And this is right now, this is all we've got. And we got to make the most of what we've got right now. There is, if you remember, I think it was Rocky 2. No, it was Rocky 3 when Clubber Lang ended up killing his trainer, Mickey. He actually punched him, he got a heart attack. And during one of the training sessions, Mickey looked at Rocky and said, "There is no tomorrow. There is no tomorrow." I don't know if you remember that from the movie, but right now more than ever, I'm just starting to feel like there is no tomorrow. We can't have this sort of long-term or long-range planning when we're in the middle of this existential crisis. When we're every day seems like it's a referendum and a filibuster on our day-to-day lives. And when you have that sort of constant evaluation and constant looking over everything that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, how can you go ahead and plan 6 months ahead or 9 months ahead or a year down the road?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't even. I'm one of the luckier ones where I've been able to be supported in this, but I can't imagine, having your business just completely obliterated and and that you can't even rebuild within that industry. Like you can't even say, "Oh, I'll just go in another direction in the same type of job that I'm doing." Especially like fitness professionals are getting obliterated. Like people in person are being obliterated. It's becoming less and less of a thing to go and seek your physical wellness in a public space. That's a fucking piece. And I was thinking about this actually. This last little nugget. This is totally random, but the people who get into fighting, MMA, whatever, boxing, all kinds of shit, a lot of those people go into fighting because they have violence issues, right? A lot of people go into fighting because they have aggression and they need to get it out. And most of these martial art clubs are being shut down, and people with aggression, with violence, with a need to expend that energy in a safe environment are not doing that. And it was just this thought that came to my mind. I was like, how many people are just embodying their anger and letting it out in unhealthy ways right now because they don't have their outlets and like what's actually going on there,
There's a lot to that, Cam, and I know when we were talking about boxing a while back, and there's an entire sociological process about boxing.
Yeah.
When you look at the history of boxing and how boxing has mirrored upward mobility of certain races over time, when you look at a lot of the great boxers from a century ago, most of them were Irish or Jewish. But then, as educational opportunities, came into play, and other economic advantages came into play, a lot of Jewish and Irish people were like, getting hit in the head and in the body really isn't a great idea, a great way to make a living. But then, and to this day, quite honestly, most of your great boxers are Black people and Latinos. And if you look at the two groups of people who are in lower socioeconomic statuses, it's mostly Black and Latino people. Right? It's BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And if you look at your boxers now, there's a lot of Black people and a lot of Latinos in gyms right now using boxing as a way to make a living because there's not nearly as many opportunities to make a living as there are for other non-BIPOC people.
Yeah.
I guarantee you there's been loads of people who have written their PhDs in sociology, earned PhDs in sociology, talking about boxing and how it mirrors the economic and socioeconomic upward mobility of certain races of people.
Wow.
So when you talk about that and you say, okay, well, hey, there's a whole lot of people that aren't going to be able to go to gyms right now or fighting. Look at MMA. Look at how many great MMA fighters there are. How many of them are white guys that come from that have two college educated parents, right?
Yeah.
How many of them are coming from countries that have done well economically over time, right? Take a look at Khabib. Khabib came from Dagestan. I mean,
You're cutting out.
Advantaged.
Sorry,
And
Joe.
yeah, I'm sorry about that.
You're
There's a strong correlation to being economically
yeah, you're cutting out.
Okay, I think
Yeah,
I think I'm back now.
yeah. Here, finish your thought, and then I got to peace out.
Yeah. I think there's a strong correlation to being from an economically disadvantaged class of person or an economically disadvantaged country, and putting yourself in a job that requires you to use your body as your way of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Oh my God, I could say so much about that. But I appreciate all that, man. Your wealth of knowledge and information, and I'm glad you hopped on with here because you're a perfect person to have this type of conversation with. And yeah, man, I hope good luck with your storage locker. I hope it goes well.
No, I'm already done with that, man. I'm driving back to my place now, so I'm good to go, bro.
Oh, okay. Right on, man. Well, have a good rest of your day anyways. We'll talk soon.
Yes, sir, brother. Peace. Thanks.
See ya.
Word.
Just getting set up here. If you guys haven't heard this song, the song is great. Coffee. This Jamaican artist. I think she's Jamaican. Koffee. There's a song, Lockdown. It's so good. Such good vibes.